Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rabbit Warren Podcast, episode 2. It's been more than 8 months. It's been more than half a year. That's just because I couldn't think of anything interesting to talk about. Yay! I will give a preemptive warning. I know that the last episode did tackle some more deeper subjects, such as the concept of death and the concept of working with cadavers, and I'm not sure if I made the correct warnings when I did that episode myself back then. But I will give a preemptive content warning and say that some parts of this episode may be triggering, may be a little bit too confronting. Specifically in reference to disordered eating, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and suicidal ideation. And if any of that is something that is too difficult for you to approach, I would highly suggest not going any further with the podcast. However, on a lighter note, just before I get into everything, I'd like to say that I may be actually moving over the Rabbit Warren podcast and rebranding it under a different name and persona, just because I, as some of you may know, have branched out my personas away from the Mallow persona, which I have found that people generally find to be a very comforting figure and sort of indicative of a safe space, to the and I've separated out to the Marzipan persona, which I believe will be more relevant for deeper discussions and more personal subject matter that I will be sort of talking about in my podcast episodes that I plan for. So if you see the Rabbit Warren become the Crow's Nest at any point, yeah, so you'll know. I am so sorry about the noise. There are helicopters circling my house and I have no clue as to why. I didn't do anything. You have to believe me, it wasn't me this time. But you might hear them throughout the recording. I'm so sorry. I am the kind of person where if I have a clear thought about something, I really want to get it done as soon as possible, regardless of what interruptions I may be facing, just because otherwise I feel like my head is going to explode. So do bear with me. The helicopters are from me. They're not around you. What I wanted to talk about today was something that has been on my mind for a little while recently. As many of you know, I am someone who has a lot of different creative endeavors that I sort of pursue. Most frequently poetry, or prose writing, just writing in general, I suppose. Art, and some other things like knitting, crocheting, cross-stitch, sculpting, 3D modeling, cooking, baking. It goes on. I make paper. I write letters because out of raw material that I've collected because I'm crazy. I'm not sure. I thought it would go away once I became medicated, but that was not the case. But what I wanted to talk about was just sort of how things have been in regards to that long term. So my experiences with creative writing, my experiences with creative outlets and processes, and how that relates to the kind of creative outlets that I currently have, such as the Crow Song EP that I've been slowly releasing one by one because I got too excited over finishing the first song that I just posted it, and then I was just like, oh fuck, now I gotta post the rest of it. Now I gotta actually make it and then post it. Damn. And I didn't consider that because I'm stupid. Anyways, so to a lot of people that I've met in my life, just in real life, I suppose, a lot of them are very surprised to discover that I have so many creative interests when I am studying medicine. And they ask me how on earth I have enough time to be able to partake in all of these activities that I like doing and still make time for study. I don't. That's the secret. I don't. I just don't. In the 8 months that have passed, some very unfortunate things have happened, such as due to my own mental health, I have not been able to graduate the first year successfully of medical school. I am redoing that. I am retrying. I'm taking another crack at it because autism be damned, I'm going to get my degree. I've been slowing down on creative processes this year, especially because there's a fine line between mentally ill enough to want to do these things to express it and too mentally ill to be able to express it in any way, shape or form. And unfortunately, the latter is where I have been for most of that time. Around the beginning of this year, in 2023, I was incredibly depressed and incredibly mentally ill. I was very, very unwell, to the degree in which I had attempted to take my own life around the month of March, I believe. And I'm not like asking for sympathy or anything. I realize now that just being so upfront with it does seem very attention-seeky, but I promise it's relevant. I talked about Cadaver's a lot and how greatly that impacted me and my view of the world in my last episode, and I wanted to build upon that in that my viewpoint of that very much changed when I was interacting with Cadavers, when I myself was someone who almost felt jealous of the dead. There's no nicer way or cleaner way to explain this. I had an intense jealousy that came from a wish to be as serene and as giving and as charitable as I saw these people who had given their bodies to science and medicine to be. And I understand now, of course, that was a very unhealthy way of seeing my circumstances and the circumstances of which these people had, gotten to this point in their lives. And the reasons why they may have made the decisions that they did. And it was incredibly reductive of me and incredibly selfish to relate these people's lives to my own in such a deep and intertwined way when I knew nothing about them and the person that they were, outside of the clues that I got from their bodies. So that, I find, was a very strange experience. But more importantly, that led me to write some work in relation to my feelings about that. And I ended up submitting it for a grade because I did not want to write another piece of prose that fit the criteria for that assessment, because I thought that would make it incredibly difficult for me to take either of those pieces seriously when I was writing them for a mark and not for myself first and foremost. I realized at a certain point that a lot of my work did talk about this craving of this, I suppose, this craving to be not living, not dead per se, but this craving to not be, if that makes any sense. I talk about my own destruction as though it were a blessing, as though it were a service to the others around me. And I understand that that is a very confronting thing to have to read, regardless of whether or not you can relate to that. My collection that I am currently in the process of writing is this large collection of almost every single piece of writing that I can find of myself, written by myself that I can find, dating all the way back to 2018. This includes things that I've written for high school assessments, things that I've written for myself, mostly, and I also intend to make a small section towards the end devoted to the poems that I started writing when I was quite young, around the age of 11. My family was always very supportive of my endeavors in poetry, actively encouraged it. I had these little tiny notebooks that I actually still own. I have every single one of them, that I would fill back to front with all of my poetry. And then the best ones my parents would pick out, like the ones that they liked the most. And honestly, some of them are still really, really good, even though I wrote them when I was like 12. So I'm honestly still really proud of them, and I'm proud of 12-year-old me for having such a way with words at such an age. Good job. So the collection is called Violet Storms and Story Endings. The reason for this is because I found that I enjoyed fairy tale endings because they were both open and closed. They were open in that there was no story ending where they grew old together, where it outlined them growing old together, and like the prince and the princess that he saved from the tower, they get married and they get old, and they love each other forever and then they die. There's no mention of that. It ends at the kiss, and it ends at the wedding, usually, of the villains getting their just desserts. But it's also closed in the idea that it refuses to acknowledge the possibility of harm coming to those people after. Like, the evil has been vanquished and nothing bad will ever occur again. You never get to know if the princess and the prince ever had an argument, ever disagreed on something. Were they ever upset with each other over trivial things? Was the fact that they didn't really know each other as people ever really a problem? We never really get to know. And I suppose that I found a lot of comfort in that. Because in one way you can fill in the rest of the story yourself. But the rest of the story will always be good. Violet Storms is in reference to a series of very strange dreams that I had. And I know how pretentious that sounds, like the whole "it came to me in a dream" type thing. Like how authors in interviews, when you're like, "Hey, what made you come up with this idea?" and they just go, "Ah, yes, God told me himself." And you're like, no, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. I can guarantee you that's not what happened. It really was just like a series of weird dreams that I had, almost like nightmares, where I think it was after I'd watched a documentary about storm chasers. You know, people who get in their car and they follow tornadoes and they follow storms and hurricanes, and they, you know, I really like that. And also the whole concept, the eye of the storm, the very center of that storm being the calmest, right before it picks back up, is such a interesting phenomena that you can use as a literary device, and I think that's wonderful. I love I love using natural phenomena as a metaphor. I think it's really, really fun. I think a lot of people do it, but a lot of people do it because it's fun. And Violet Storms is because I dreamt of those storms being so aggressive and so almost unearthly that rather than being any real human color, because if you think about it, you don't really see purple that much in like the natural world, outside of maybe flowers. But even then, there aren't a lot of flowers that are purple that we haven't just like bred to be purple. Like purple cosmos flowers, they're, I believe, naturally occurring, but they're pretty popular for the fact that they're purple. Mallow flowers, my own namesake, so I chose violet. So Violet Storms and Story Endings. This is probably the first time I'll ever be reading any of this out in a public space. But I wanted to discuss some of my later pieces of writing, which are less poetry and they're more prose, I suppose. If you hear just some clicking noises in the background, that's just me scrolling down, because I do not have a physical copy of this, because my elbows are very weak, and I'll come back to that. My elbows and my joints are very, very weak. That is relevant to what I want to say today. But I will read something. Some of these titles are very funny. They're all numbered. They're not in any specific order, I just number them so I know how many are in the collection. Number 13 is titled "Hamlet was gay, I swear," and he was. If you disagree with me, I'll be upset with you, and also you'll be wrong, and that'll be very embarrassing for you. But I have spoken about myself in ways that are incredibly disjointed, and I tend to depersonalize myself, dehumanize myself. I'm not fully certain as to why. Like, now that I am away from the mindset that I am in when I write, it is hard to explain in words exactly why that is and why I see myself in these uncharitable ways. I write about myself like I am afraid to take up space, as if every moment that I am alive, I want to make up for it somehow. Like, my acts of servitude are not professions of love, but rather me feeling like there is some sort of debt to the world that I have to pay just for living. For example, number 30 is titled, "I Can Fix You, Lamau Good Luck." Don't ask me why I named it that. Number 30. I will begin to read it out. I am a band-aid fix to a permanent problem. I am a bleeding heart, broken martyr, sacrificial lamb to the slaughter. I cut my own Achilles tendon. I'm a ceremonial being, cut open and gutted like a fish to be examined for word from gods. Broken bracelet clutch, dried out eyeliner pen, last dregs of drink in a glass bottle, teeth and tongue, lost hair tie with rotting elastic. I am chalk dust you breathe in. I am cat fur in your favorite jacket. Something helpful to something you hate. Not deeply, just enough to annoy you. I cut my hair short, I close my mouth to food, to speech. I bring my knees to my chest, make myself as small and out of the way as I can be. I am the serpent in the tree of knowledge. I speed through stoplights. I am excavated from clay and dirt and rock. I am porcelain, smashed to pieces by an accidental push. My body is shards, and you cut your skin to ribbons, putting me back together. I am glued together with blood and wax. I am not entirely certain as to what I meant when I wrote this. There's a lot of sections in this part, in this in these pieces of writing where I talk about that I'm not certain what I mean 100% of the time. That a lot of the time I'm trying to capture the essence of something, the feeling of something, rather than exactly the message itself, if that makes any sense. There are a few other pieces I haven't quite typed up yet. I refer to a lot of things as food, as hunger, as starvation, like it's sustenance, like different parts of my life are nothing but fuel. I talk about cannibalism quite a bit. It's because it's something that is so grotesque and yet so intimate, I suppose. It commodifies a person, it breaks them down into a resource rather than an individual, and I have felt throughout my life that that is what I am. I feel as though that for quite a while I have been treated not quite like a person by the people around me, but as someone to be called upon in a time of need, somebody that will always help, someone that can fix things, not as the person that I wanted to be seen as. I just wanted to be, treated like any other person. But I guess I ruined that by having the personality of someone where if I see somebody doing something badly and I know I can do it better, then I get really annoyed and I make them let me do it for them. I like to portray myself as a very pragmatic person, like someone who makes choices based on how beneficial they are in the long run, but in reality that's not who I am at all. I am a very deeply sentimental person, a very deeply emotional person. I find it very difficult to break out of decisions that I've made while I was emotional rather than logical. And I write about that in a piece. It does not have a title, but I will read it. I wonder if stars wish on blades of grass, on grains of sand, on the whispers of the things that sleep in soil. I wonder if blown away lashes and dandelion seeds have lottery chances, have odds that you can bet on, have ways to be rigged in your favor. Is it better to think of them as little childish thoughts, only truly something wanted in the moment that you make them? In that case, it would be wrong of me to think on every blown out candle, on every piece of space debris burning up and out in our atmosphere, and it would be alright that I forget each one, never able to thank whoever granted them. I dream of clouds and those hazy shapes they make, shape my own hopes into vague approximations of the future, and I wonder if I should stop, let it be rain, water that slips between my fingers every so often. But until I am given explanation, given answer, I will lose myself in this wishful thinking. I think no matter how much you pride yourself on how logical and how thoughtful and how rational you are, you will never truly be able to escape the general human condition of wishing, of hoping, of maybe believing in a little luck every so often. In my opinion, it's never really hurt anybody. As long as it maintains that level of childishness, where it's not something inherently that you definitely believe in, but it's something that brings you comfort. But more importantly, I'd like to talk about how much writing these things has affected me, mentally and physically. To start with mentally, because that's easier to talk about, because it's poetic and spiritual and whatever, so even if I kind of mess up my words, it's okay. You might still get the gist of what I'm saying. Sometimes I think that my poetry being so rooted in the sadness that I feel as a person is potentially part of the reason why I am so sad. Maybe this glorification of the sense of being unhappy, of this like obsession with being in a state of grieving, in a state of upset, melancholy, being in love with being unhappy, I think is a mindset that's very, very difficult to extricate yourself from. And it's something that we see also in history with people such as Oscar Wilde, where it can be argued that the romanticism of his sadness was done by himself. Or people such as Vincent van Gogh, who his sadness and his mental health issues, his struggles, his suicidal thoughts, his belief of his own self-worth, those were all things that were used later by people in order to almost, in this very unhappy, insensitive way, I believe, tarnish his actual legacy and the actual beauty of his art in the fact that he made it in times when he was feeling better, in times when he was getting better, in times where he felt comfortable and happy enough to profess his love for the people that he cared for, like his brother and his friends. People have warped him to be this mad genius, this artist framed and entirely defined by his struggle. People will say things like, well, it was incredibly sad that he was suffering, but without his suffering we wouldn't have gotten his art. But the truth is, his art should not have taken precedence over his life. He should have been remembered not for the incredible sadness and difficulty that he experienced in his life day to day, every morning, every evening, the way that so many do. He should not be known for that. He should not have that celebrated. That should not be what people romanticize about him. I truly do believe that it would be better if he had been happy his whole life, if he had known joy, like any other person who isn't, suffering from mental illness. Have moments of depression in your life and have that not be who you are, and to have him be forgotten by history, than to be remembered for a legacy so tainted by others' obsessions of creating the melancholic genius, the sad artist, the disturbed artist. That is not a legacy that I feel should be celebrated. It should not be represented the way that it is, because it isn't the truth. First and foremost, it's not the truth of who he was. it was never the truth of what he was. People are too obsessed with saying, oh my god, he was crazy, he ate yellow paint. Yes, because he wanted to die. And is that not incredibly upsetting? And yet I find myself doing the same thing to myself. Looking at myself and almost romanticizing the moments where I become a shadow of who I truly am. When I start suffering from delusion and start believing that maybe everyone is fucking after me, you know, like shit like that. And in those moments I write these incredible pieces with incredibly hard-hitting words, but the thing is, I shouldn't find such deep pride in those in comparison to my equally good pieces that I write when I am sane. I romanticize myself, and I romanticize the worst parts of me in a way that is so damaging, and it spreads to me physically. I'm so obsessed and so simultaneously careless and perfectionist that I will pump out thousands and thousands of words sitting on the spot on a day. And if you follow my Twitter, or you know me personally at all, you will have heard me complain about my joint problems. And I regret to say that a lot of it is my fault. Not so much my lower body, but my hands, my arms, I did that to myself. Because I don't know when to stop. I don't know how to stop. When I want to write, I will write, even when my hands hurt so badly that there are tears streaking down my face, and that is so bad. That is wrong of me to do. I will frequently forget to eat. I will frequently forget to sleep, to go to the bathroom, to wash my face, to do anything normal, get up, walk around, because I'm so absorbed in my work, and that is killing me. I write about starving as if the starving isn't because of my brain's inability to feel control in anything, so I exert control in ways that I can feel like I control, like eating. Fuck me, but you're not really in control, are you? And I'm not in control of myself. When it comes to these creative pursuits, I'm not. I do these things at a cost, at an incredible cost that nobody should be putting into their work of any kind. It's horrible. And I subject myself to the same gaze that the people of stable mental standing do to those who aren't as stable, people who are struggling, people who do find it difficult to interact with daily society every day in the way that people expect you to. I do that to myself. I apply that gaze, that typical cultural zeitgeist gaze on myself, and that is a realization that I've come to, and it is greatly distressing to me. To be human is not to be loved out of pity or sympathy or even empathy. It is to be loved regardless. Not for those traits. Not for those traits that make people look at you and feel like they're looking at a kicked puppy. It is not that. That should be something that is accepted but not celebrated. I don't want to be treated like a basket case. I don't want to be treated like something to pity. I don't want to be loved, and I don't want my work to be admired as the creations of a madman or the creations of someone who desperately needed help and refused to get it. I do not ever want my work to be seen as the production of someone who is unaware, who is incapable of interacting with normal daily society. I do not want my things to be seen as written by someone who cannot know love, and yet that is all I write about. All I ever write about is about my woes and my inability to be loved and my inability to be seen as a person, and I do it to myself. My own gaze is what objectifies me. And perhaps that is okay. I'm still not quite sure, I'll be honest. But what I can say is that I'm certain that I will be significantly happier, and that is no longer the case. Anywho, thank you for tuning into this episode. I think I'm going to end it there. I will in the future be holding some guests. I know that I said previously that I probably wouldn't be, but I would like to hold some interviews, I think. I think it would be really fun to have some guests on, some other people, some of my friends, my deep, close friends that I do care about deeply. And I think that they will all have interesting viewpoints to share. And I'd like to platform that. Anyways, thank you for listening. And whenever you're listening to this, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and I hope you have a good day. I'll see you whenever. Bye bye.